Hi guys, how are you doing today? Welcome back to Random Lifestyle Vlog. So today we have another review video. We're going to be testing all three of Hourglass face palettes. I am literally obsessed with them. You might be thinking, why do I need all three of them? I think it's more like want than need. These are absolutely beautiful, my favorite face palettes. And let me just show you something to prove that. So this is my 2020 palette and look at it. So I don't know if you can see, I hit the pan on these two, but like properly. As you can see, there's not really much left in here. And all the other shades are literally flat at this point. I do have one more palette from 2021 and I didn't really hit the pan there, but like all the shades are pretty much flat at this point and I've been using it quite a lot. So I thought that these palettes are definitely going to be something I will be using. So that was one reason. Another reason was that I couldn't make up my mind on like which one I should pick up. Technically, the butterfly palette should be the lightest, the tiger one should be for like a darker skin, and I suppose the elephant would be my skin tone. I mean, first of all, I do really like these graphics of like butterflies and tigers a little bit more than this elephant here. And also the elephant palette actually looked the least interesting to me. So I decided to go for all of these and we'll see if that was a good decision or not. I'm going to test them all. I'm just going to wash off my face, like at least the bottom part. I'm going to test these all on my skin, so you'll be able to see how these shades look on the medium skin tone. So let's start with the Tiger palette. This is how it looks inside. I mean, these are so pretty, aren't they? So let me just show you the colors here. There you go. So it's definitely much darker than your typical Hourglass palette. They've been trying to create a palette that's going to be good for darker skin tones. They failed so many times, but this palette definitely looks much darker. I'm thinking that it will probably be a little bit too dark for me, but I will make it work. I will make it work for sure. Or we'll see, right? So let's have a closer look at the shades. So here we have a finishing powder, Transcendent Light. Oh, as you can see, this is not going to be a finishing powder for me for sure. I'm going to try and use it as a bronzer. We'll see if it's pigmented enough. Then we have Metallic Strobe Powder, Brilliant Glow Strobe Light. That's a very long name, but there you go. Then we have Blush Burnished Glow, and I love the way it looks. I mean, this is such a beautiful color. Then here we have Metallic Strobe Powder, Divine Strobe Light. Next up we have Metallic Strobe Powder, Copper Flash Strobe Light. And this one over here is Blush Iridescent Rose. So let me first swatch these for you. I'm going to, yeah, look, this is the finishing powder. So obviously this is not going to be a finishing powder for me. I'm going to try and use it as a bronzer. So these are the swatches, and just to let you know, these swatches are actually quite like thick. I did apply quite a lot of product on my skin, so obviously you can blend it out for sure. It doesn't really have to look like that. You can blend it out and you can build it up, so that is actually a great thing about Hourglass product. So as you can see, this is the finishing powder. This is the blush that I really like the color of. It's definitely quite pigmented, so I have to be very careful with that. And yeah, these two shades, this one over here, you can't probably see that much. It's like a really pretty highlighter, and a very similar situation over here. This one seems a little bit more sparkly. Okay, so it's time to remove this part of my makeup, and let's try this palette on my face. Okay, the moment of truth. Let's try this palette. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to apply this pseudo bronzer, which is like the finishing powder for darker skin. I'm going to apply this on one side of my face, and then we go from there. So let's try this first. It is pigmented, okay? It is definitely pigmented. I think I definitely put too much. Do you know, I do have like heavy hand with Hourglass. I mentioned that before. They tend to create products for like lighter skin tones, so usually these are a little bit like too light for me sometimes even, so that's why I do tend to have heavy hand. But I need to remind myself that this palette actually is for darker skin tones. So as you can see, there's a lot of pigmentation. The good thing about Hourglass is that you can't really hurt yourself. Like even if you apply too much, you'll be able to blend it out to some extent. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to blend it out and, you know, hope for the best. So yeah, it's definitely working as a bronzer. Let's try some blush. So I'm just going to apply this one over here. Okay, not to apply too much. Oh, this one is definitely much more workable. This is something that I can apply a little bit more of and it's not going to, you know, hurt me. So yeah, that blush is definitely something I could work with. I think if you have a deeper skin tone, this is going to be more like this kind of like a highlighting blush, something like that. But yeah, this one is actually really pretty. And we're going to test a highlighter on this side of my face. So let's try this one here. I do feel like this one is going to be really pretty. This one is quite shiny, isn't it? Let's see this one first. Yeah, it is actually really beautiful highlighter. It has definitely a little bit of this kind of golden undertone. It's going to be perfect, especially for summer for my skin tone. It's so pretty. I really like it. Okay, so I do really like it. It's like a very kind of natural look. I do have to be careful with some of these shades because they are very pigmented. So on this side of my face, we're going to test this blush over here, and I'm going to use it as this kind of like a sculpting blush. I'm not really going to put any bronzer here, so let's do that. Look at that pigmentation, look at this. Okay, careful Paulina, careful, you don't really want to look like a clown. So let's see. Look, it was just a little bit and it's definitely very pigmented. It is pretty though, but this one I would definitely advise some caution. It is pigmented, it's super pigmented, and I just dabbed like really slightly in it. So it's going to be really nice on a darker skin tone. On my skin tone, it's workable. I'm not really sure if I would risk this palette if my skin was much lighter than mine. My skin is like medium, so yeah, I think I can definitely make it work. So let's try this highlighter now. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with this I don't know what that is, like a highlighter, this very dark highlighter. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that. Let's try this one here. Okay, so I'm not a massive fan. Look how shiny this one is, and if you have textured skin, then this is going to enhance it for sure. It's very shiny. It does give me a little bit of this Ofra kind of a highlighter vibes. It's very, very pigmented. I'm definitely need to blend it out a little bit. I feel like for my skin tone, this shade will work much better in the summertime, because you know, sometimes I do like this kind of glowy complexion, but my skin needs to be slightly more tanned, you know. I don't really use any fake tan now because I can't be asked, but yeah, now that I blended it out, it's a bit better, but still look how shiny this looks compared to this side, which is actually quite natural. And you know, this highlighter literally like catches light in a very kind of natural way. This one is very shiny. So yeah, definitely the type of palette I will probably use a little bit more in the summer. Let's try and apply this color somewhere. I'm not really sure what I should do with that. I'm not really sure, like it doesn't really go anywhere. I'm just going to try and apply it somewhere on my cheek and let's see. So okay, this side is less shiny, so let's just try it here. Yeah, very pigmented and very shiny. So I feel like this is definitely going to be again something that might work better in summer, and it's definitely going to if you have textured skin, that this is not going to be your best friend for sure. It might look pretty on a deeper skin tone, but for me, definitely something I'm not going to be using. I'm not going to be using either of these shades anytime soon. I'm probably going to keep them for summer. But this palette is definitely suitable for deeper skin tones. For my skin tone, it's, I mean, I can make it work for myself, but this is definitely too dark for me, like generally. There are a few shades I really like these four over here are really beautiful, and I could actually use them now if I wanted to. These two, make this more like a summery palette for me. So that was our first palette. What do you guys think so far? Let's have a closer look at the medium palette, which is the elephant one. So there you go. This is the palette. They're also pretty, you know? And here are our shades. My first thought about this palette is that this is not what I would expect to be medium. It is much lighter. Like, look, this is a bronzer. It's very light, right? So just to compare, a look at these shades, it doesn't really seem like this should be the next step after this palette. I think there should be something maybe in between. The tiger one is definitely for deeper skin tones, whereas the elephant, I'm not really sure whether this is like a proper medium. I would probably say this is like a light medium, but I can potentially pull it off. But if you have any darker skin than mine, I'm not sure if this is going to be like enough. So that's actually quite interesting, because as much as the tiger palette is what I already described as my summer palette, this is probably my winter palette, because I don't think this will be dark enough for me to be a bronzer when I get some tan. Okay, so the closer look at the shades, this one over here is Finishing Powder Dim Light. This is one of the probably most popular shades of a finishing powder. It's really beautiful. Then we have Finishing Powder Soft Light. This is Metallic Strobe Powder Beaming Strobe Light. Here we have a bronzer, Lustrous Bronze Light. See, this is a light bronzer. A blush, Iridescent Coral. And then this blush over here is Radiant Rose. So I don't think you'll be able to see any of those like finishing powders on my skin. If you haven't tried them before, they are just amazing. They just give you this kind of like a soft focused kind of skin type. It just looks like you're photoshopped. Such a beautiful thing. It kind of blends everything on your face beautifully, and it's just stunning. It reflects light. It's just so beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to swatch whatever I can. I'm going to try and swatch those finishing powders. Why not? I just don't think you'll be able to see anything. So these are the swatches. Here are those like setting powders, but these are like really thick kind of swatches. I really tried hard, and you can't really see that much here. I mean, the dim light here, you can see a little bit, but this one not so much. This is the highlighter. This is the bronzer. I mean, you can see this a little bit, but as I said, again, this was very kind of heavy-handed swatch. So obviously, if you blend it out, there's not going to be that much visible. And these are the blushes. This blush is actually really pretty. It has this kind of like slight shine to it, but it's not as sparkly as the one in the Tiger palette, you know, the one that I just didn't know what to do with. So let's try it out. I don't really have to think much of what to do with this palette. Obviously, I'm going to use this bronzer and this highlighter on both cheeks, and then I'm just going to try each of those blushes and each of those setting powders, although I'm not really sure if you'll be able to tell the difference when it comes to like those finishing powders. So let's start with this bronzer, and let's see how this is going to work on my skin. So yeah, it's definitely lighter than this finishing powder in the Tiger palette, but you can build it up. So it is visible to some extent, but I do have to apply quite a lot, I'm not going to lie. So definitely winter palette for me, because I wouldn't be able to pull it off with a little bit more tan on my skin. But yeah, this is actually all right. It's just enough for this to be visible, so that is okay. So the blushes, I'm going to go with the rose one first on my right cheek here. So let's see. Well, that's a really nice one. It actually looks very natural. It gives you this kind of flushed cheek kind of color. I really like it. So let's test the coral one with a little kind of sparkle. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see that, but it just looks so lovely on the swatch. Yeah, also very natural. It does give you a little bit different vibe, but still very natural look, a little bit more glowy. You can actually see that it's slightly glowy. See the comparison, this one is actually more like cool tone. This one has a little bit of more glow and warmth to it. But yeah, they're both really pretty. Okay, let's do the highlighter now. We only have one highlighter over here, so let's see. It is quite sparkly. I would probably prefer this to be more kind of like muted with these shades here, but it's still not as strong as the one from the Tiger palette. See, it is quite glowy. Just going to blend this a little bit so that we have like a better look on how it should kind of look. So there you go. And now I'm going to finish this off with these setting powders. So, okay, let's just use dim light on my right cheek. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see much. It definitely smooths your skin. It makes your pores look less visible. And it does give you this kind of like soft focus effect to your skin. So there you go. And then I'm going to apply the other one on the other cheek, but I'm not really sure if you'll be able to tell the difference because it's not supposed to be visible on your skin. It's supposed to make your skin look better, but it doesn't really have to be, or it shouldn't really be visible, right? So even though this highlighter is actually quite shiny, with those finishing powders it looks a little bit more muted, which I personally prefer. I do prefer this kind of look. So yeah, all in all, I think this is a really nice palette. It's comprehensive as well because it has pretty much everything you need. It has a bronzer, a highlighter, 2 blushes, and 2 finishing powders. So there's like everything you might need here. But it's definitely not something I would describe as typical medium. My skin is medium and I can barely pull this off, like barely. I think if you're any darker, if your skin is any darker than mine, you might be struggling with seeing any sign of this bronzer, to be honest. Okay, so that leaves us with the last palette, with the butterfly one. I really love butterflies. So yeah, this is the packaging, super cute. And look at the colors. So I needed to grab the elephant palette because I was a little bit confused with the blushes. You can straight away see that the blushes in the butterfly palette are actually darker than the ones in the medium palette, which is a little bit odd. We're going to swatch them, we're just going to compare them, but they definitely look much darker. So yeah, that is a little bit weird situation here. Definitely we have some like super light shades over here, like these 3 are super light, but then we have really bright blushes. And then we have this kind of like a golden sparkly highlighter. So I'm not really sure who this palette is supposed to be for, because I don't know. I mean, I'm not really sure if this will work on a very like fair skin, especially the highlighter. It is very warm, so I'm not really sure if that will actually work. And then those blushes are actually quite strong. I haven't really tried the butterfly palette, but I would probably say that they're both suitable for lighter skin tones, but they will just give you like a different result. The elephant palette is very natural, whereas here you would get this kind of like rosy cheeks kind of situation. I'm actually very confused with this butterfly palette, to be honest. The most confusing so far. Okay, let's try and do some swatches. There you go, these are the swatches. Funny enough, you can actually probably see these setting powders a little bit more than in the elephant palette, because they're just like white. But again, I am pretty sure they're going to be translucent on my skin, so I can make it work to some extent. Blushes, as you can see, very intense. I'm just going to swatch the elephant ones just to compare in a minute. This is the highlighter. It is very glowy, and I'm not really sure whether this is going to be that great for like a very light skin tone. Whereas these three shades are definitely for lighter skin tones. So yeah, very confusing. Let's swatch the blushes from the elephant palette and compare them. So there you go, these are the 2 blushes from the elephant palette. As you can see, these are definitely more intense. So confusing, but let's try it on. The shades here are, this one over here is finishing powder, ethereal light. Then this is the strobe powder, incandescent light. Then we have blush, soft flush. Finishing powder, diffused light. Blush, sunset glow. And then we have metallic strobe powder, celestial strobe light. So that's going to be quite easy to choose. Again, we don't really have any bronzer, but we do have 2 blushes, 2 highlighters, and 2 finishing powders. So let's go. So let's apply this blush on my right cheek. So let's see. Look how intense this is, and I didn't really take that much, but it is very intense. So for me, that's okay, because you know I can blend it out, it will work fine. But I'm still not sure how this is going to work on a lighter skin tone. I'm going to apply this blush on my other cheek now. Yeah, a very similar situation, quite an intensely looking blush. So if you're looking for this kind of rosy cheek kind of look, then you'll get it from here, but at the same time it is quite dark. This one is actually even more visible than the other one, I would say. But personally, I can't really complain. This is actually quite alright. So let's try this kind of a very shiny highlighter now. Let's see how this one is going to work. That's actually really pretty on my skin. It is glowy, but it's not as yellow gold as I expected this to be. It's more like champagne gold. So yeah, I really like it. Let me just blend this out a little bit to see. Yeah, it's actually really pretty. It doesn't really have that much sparkle, so that it would enhance my texture of my skin. Okay, so I'm going to use the other highlighter on my left cheek. Let's see if I can see anything. Okay, so yes, you definitely can see this highlighter on my skin tone, but it's much like colder, I would say. I'm not really sure if this actually suits me that much. Obviously, again, going to blend it out a little bit. It's definitely more subtle. It's not as glowy. It does give you just a little bit of that, you know, highlighting kind of effect, but it is pretty. I'm just not really sure if this actually suits me. Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to work with it. Obviously, I'm probably going to use it anyway. I'm just going to have to think like what colors to use it with, but yeah. Okay, so let's do the finishing powders now. I'm going to try with the darker of these two. Hopefully they're not going to look too white on my skin, but as I said, I'm expecting them to be more translucent than anything. Yeah. See, that doesn't really make me look any whiter than I am, so that's perfectly fine. I mean, if you have medium skin tone, you can just use it just fine. Yeah, and then I'm going to use the super white one on my left cheek, and I'm hoping for a similar result here. Yeah, that's going to be quite fine as well. It doesn't really leave any form of like white cast, or it doesn't really make me look pale or anything. So that's definitely something I can use. Okay, so this is the test done. What do you think about these palettes? My thoughts are this: if you're planning on buying one of these palettes, like maybe around now, because you know we have all those like great deals and everything. So I think that if you're planning to buy one of these palettes, you can use my face as your guide. Definitely any darker than me, Tiger palette. This actually could work really nicely for much deeper skin tones because it was very pigmented on my skin. So that one, either a summer palette for someone like me, maybe someone a little bit lighter skinned as well, and perfect for anyone with darker, deeper skin tone than mine. If your skin is lighter than mine, you can choose between these two. I mean, definitely Elephant will work for you, and it's a very comprehensive palette. This is the only palette of those three that has everything you need in here. So you have your bronzer, your blush, your highlighter, and your finishing powder. The other two palettes, the Tiger and the Butterfly, they don't have bronzer. As I mentioned before, I do use a finishing powder in the Tiger palette as my bronzer, but then I don't have a finishing powder. This one is comprehensive. It's going to be perfect for anyone with lighter skin tone than mine, apart from like people who have very like super fair skin. Then I guess this is going to be slightly too dark. Even those setting powders, those finishing powders are probably a little bit too dark. You can find finishing powders perfect for very light skin tones here in the Butterfly palette. The finishing powders and this highlighter, they are going to be great for like a very light skin tone. The rest, I'm not really sure. I mean, I'm glad that I have this palette. I'll make it work. I'm just definitely going to use it. But to be honest, out of these three palettes, this one makes the least sense to me. And I do understand the kind of vibe maybe they were going for, the kind of like flash cheeks kind of look. But at the same time, it still feels like it's like half of this palette is for people with like very fair skin tone, and half of it is for like medium skin tone maybe. That's how I perceive it. So there you go. These are my thoughts about these palettes. What do you guys think? Please let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you very much for watching. For more beauty related stuff, see those videos over here. I'm going to see you very soon. Take care. Bye.